Hello and welcome to Fanfiction 101, tips for writers and readers on tagging, comments, betas, etiquette, and more. Feel free to let me know if you have any questions as we go along, and I'll do my best to answer. I'm AJ Constantine, so I read, write, and beta Good Omens fanfiction. But my exposure to fanfiction is fairly recent. Before the Good Omens TV series aired, I vaguely knew that fanfic existed, but I'd never read any of it. Eventually, to my delight, I stumbled across Archive of Our Own, or AO3. And from there, I found the Good Omens fanfiction community and discovered there was a whole new language to learn and a lot of nuances about fanfic that took me a while to figure out. The very first time I joined a busy Discord server, I swear I didn't understand half of what people were talking about. So I did make some mistakes during my learning process of this new hobby. And in the past year or so, I've been thinking about what kinds of things would have been useful for people like me in fanfic to know and think about. Things that I would have loved to have known when I got started and only managed to figure out in bits and pieces over time. So I don't consider myself an authority on these topics, and my intent is not to tell you how you must do things. My intent is to give you some things to think about, some useful tips, and do what I can to encourage this fandom to continue to be a wonderful, supportive place for everyone. To prepare for this presentation, I interviewed and obtained feedback from over 20 plus Good Omens writers, readers, and betas to obtain their insight on all these topics. To all of these wonderful people, I want to express my sincere appreciation. I learned a lot from each of you, and this presentation would not have been possible without your time and support. You are all so very, very awesome. Thank you. My first topic is about tagging. The ratings tag. These descriptions are AO3's definitions, and they are generally self-explanatory. I will mention here that a not rated tag is the default option. So make sure that if it's appropriate for you for your story that you remember to select a rating tag, because it's helpful for you to your readers to set appropriate expectations. I personally would consider a not rated fic to be in the read at your own risk category, since it may not be clear what type of audience it's appropriate for. I rarely see not rated selected, but when I do, it seems to be when the story contains material that may be considered controversial, so that it could be very, very much open to interpretation as to what rating it should be. One really big thing I recommend here is that you start with a rating that you believe the story will end up with. So, if you know that your story will eventually earn an explicit rating in later chapters, don't start with a general or teen rating and then only change it when you get to the explicit chapter. I do know that sometimes for works in progress, a rating may change if a story takes a direction the author wasn't originally intending, and that's fine. But the author should be as upfront as possible about the rating from the start so as not to mislead readers who might want to avoid mature or explicit rated fics. These are AO3's definitions of the archive wording tags. Again, most of these are self-explanatory, and it's up to the discretion of the writer to decide if they're appropriate for their story. One of the things I'll point out here is that for the rape non-con tag, I tend to see this used more for fics that contain rape content, not as much for fics that only contain dubious consent content, which actually brings me to the topic of my next slide, which is the tag, chose not to use archive warnings. I tend to see this tag used when the story has things like dubious consent elements, but the author felt it wasn't enough to warrant the rape non-con tag, which is a pretty heavy tag. Or it has violence elements, but the author felt it wasn't enough to warrant the graphic descriptions of violence tag. I also see it used when the story may have subject matter that can be difficult to warn for everything that might be upsetting, such as a story about war that might include blood, wounds, PTSD, etc., or maybe a story with psychologically difficult themes that might not fall into the other tag categories all that well. Or Sometimes I see it used when a story might have a plot point the author wishes to keep hidden so as not to spoil the plot. So I think of this tag as a read at your own risk tag because depending on what additional tags are used, it may not be clear what will be in that fic. So as a reader, I think good basic advice is that you may want to consider if you're in a good place mentally to read the story, or if you will be able to back out if it gets too rough for you. Some authors don't mind readers asking them directly if a story contains certain subject matter to help them decide if they can read the fic or not. Tagging relationships. Romantic and/or sexual relationships should be indicated by using a slash between the characters, and non-sexual, non-romantic relationships, such as platonic relationships between friends, family, etc., are indicated with the ampersand. So for example, the tag Crowley and Warlock indicates a friendship relationship, but Crowley/Warlock would be a very different fic. One of the things I recommend here is that you do not use both Aziraphale and Crowley and Aziraphale/Crowley in the same fic, even if they're only friends for the majority of the fic. And this is because using both doesn't give the reader a clear indication as to what the theme of the story is, and it's not helpful when readers use search filters. So for example, if a reader wants to search for only platonic relationship stories, it will pull up everything with that tag, which muddies the waters if the Aziraphale and Crowley tag is also used. So tagging characters. Random note here, you don't need to feel that you need to tag every character that doesn't play a major role. So if, for example, you have a story that's mostly Aziraphale and Crowley linked together romantically, Anathema shows up briefly, and Liger is discussed in a few lines or less, you can use the tag Aziraphale/Crowley, use the mentioned X character freeform tag, which would be mentioned Anathema device, and then don't bother to tag for Liger. Now, this is all obviously very much up to the author. These are just tips and tricks to help your tags contain an accurate reflection as to what your story is about. Then we come to additional tags. This is where you create tags that show the major elements of your story. As I said before, what tags you use are very much a matter of personal preference. Some authors are minimal taggers, others like to include a lot of tags, and as long as you're including appropriate content warning for potentially sensitive materials, it's fine either way. It is helpful to include enough tags to give the reader an idea of what the fic is about, although there may be a balancing act between doing that and not giving away the entire plot in the tags. There are two types of additional tags. The first type is canonical tags. These tags will autocomplete when you start typing them in. So in my example here, I have a human AU, and when I start typing in alternate universe, canonical tag choices appear as autocomplete options. So the canonical tags are very helpful when searching for and filtering tags. So I have a question here. How would you tag a story that can be read both romantically and platonically with an and or a slash? So to go back to your point on that, if the characters end up in a romantic relationship, I would still tag that as with the slash because the end result is a romantic story or romantic theme. I would not include the and. Another question is, what do you think about using the slash when relationship involves a rape? I would, that is still a sexual relationship, so I would still include that as a slash, and then obviously you would be very careful about including the other appropriate tags. The second type of additional tags are non-canonical tags. These are the tags that do not autocomplete when you're typing them in. And while you can actually search for these tags, they aren't as common or as easily searched for and filtered as by canonical tags. So in this example here, the canonical tags are at the top, and the non-canonical tags are highlighted in yellow at the bottom. Non-canonical tags are interesting. They're often used to give more information about the story that canonical tags don't give. So in this example at the top, alternate universe human is a canonical tag, but courtesan Crowley is a non-canonical tag. But in this case, for this particular story, both tags give important information about what's in the story. Another way that some authors use non-canonical tags is to give a flavor of the story, sometimes in a humorous way. So, like in this example below, this fic had the non-canonical tag sex and sock suspenders. This tag was likely not essential to the story, but it can add a bit of humor and perhaps interest a reader. Not every author does these extra funny or silly tags, so don't feel that you're required to add them. I myself am a fairly minimal tagger, and there's many different tagging styles out there, and they're all great. For readers, if you are at all concerned about what the content of a story is, it is your responsibility to read the tags. Use them to judge if this is the right fic for you. It can be really annoying to authors when readers complain that they should have been warned about something that was already included in the tags. Request to add tags. For readers, if you think a tag should be added, it's perfectly fine to request the author to add the tag, but please be nice, ask politely, don't be rude or angry. Even if you think it was a significant tag that was missed, please give the writer the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they simply forgot to include that tag. And regardless of what the author's response is, move on with your life. You don't have to read the story, and you're not the fandom police. For writers, listen to your readers if they suggest that you add the tags, but you are not required to add them. In most cases, writers will have no problems adding the requested tags, but some writers will choose not to, either because they disagree with the suggested tag, or perhaps because they have a tagging style preference and don't feel the tag is necessary. There is a maximum tag limit of 75 total fandom, character, relationship, and additional tags. This tag limit was established by AO3 in August 2021. Previously posted works that have over 75 tags will remain unchanged. However, if an author ever edits those works, they will have to decrease the tag number to save it. Ultimately, the goal of tags should be 1. Help people find your story via the tags for people that do searches. 2. Provide details not provided in the summary. And 3. Warn for content. To figure out what tags you might want to use, you can look at the tags on other stories for ideas or ask for advice in fanfic communities on places like Discord. I do encourage writers to avoid adding tags or author notes that are self-disparaging, like, this story isn't any good. All that does is encourage self-negativity. You should really try to be proud of yourself. You wrote something. Go you. And it can discourage readers from wanting to read your story, which is probably not what you want. Generally, it's recommended to list the tags in this order. Canonical tags first, followed by non-canonical tags, unless the non-canonical tags help relay information essential to the story. So in this example, the yellow highlighted non-canonical tags are mostly used at the end, except for courtesan Crowley tag because it's a main component of the story. To maximize the value of the tags you include on your work, ensure your tags are in the correct tag categories, such as fandom in the fandoms field, relationships in the relations field, etc. Use the additional tags field to include anything that doesn't fit well into the above categories, things like themes, genres, tropes, etc., that a user might want to know when deciding if they want to read your story. Ensure each tag contains just one concept, one fandom, one character, one relationship, etc. Ensure your tags can stand alone, so that no additional context is required to understand what the heck the tag refers to. And spell check, and please double check your tags before posting, especially if it contains potentially sensitive content. For stories that have tags for things like dubious consent, drug use, violence, etc., a reader can choose to read the story, but they don't know when it's happening in the story. So a writer can choose, if they want to add chapter content warnings in the chapter notes. So in this example, this fic has a physical abuse tag. The chapter note includes a content warning letting the reader know that that tag applies to this particular chapter so that the reader can be prepared. Again, this is a matter of personal preference, as some writers may not want to do this as it may spoil the plot, or they just don't want to, but a lot of readers appreciate a warning. Another technique, which many readers find helpful for sensitive content, is including a summary of the chapter content in the end chapter notes, so that readers can make an informed decision about whether or not they're comfortable reading that chapter. By doing this, specifics can be added without spoiling things for readers who don't want to know spoilers, and clarity can be offered for readers that do. So in my example here, I included a content warning in the beginning chapter notes with a note saying, see endnote for description of what's in this chapter if you would like to know what happens prior to choosing to read it. And then I included the spoiler description at the bottom at the end chapter notes. How to have a healthier relationship with stats, kudos, and comments. This is a very important topic in fanfic, and I definitely wanted to talk about this before I move on to comments. It is so easy to crave and get addicted to the validation of likes, kudos, comments, and reader statistics. But very much like a drug, it can feel like it's never quite enough. The brief high that you get from this validation is fleeting. A writer can fall into the trap of constantly looking for additional validation and feel bad about their writing or themselves when it seems like it's not enough. I've seen writers begging for comments, stating how sad they are when they don't get enough of them. I've seen writers say they felt depressed because their story didn't get as many hits, kudos, comments, or subscribers that they were hoping for. There's a lot of validation craving out there, and I understand it. I do. I feel it sometimes too. And it's truly lovely to get positive feedback. Of course, we want that. But please believe me when I tell you that stats, kudos, comments, subscribers do not tell you if you're good at writing. They are not a way to tell you if you are loved. They have nothing to do with the quality of your work or your worth as a person. So, especially if you feel these things are affecting you in a negative way, focus on the things you can control instead of the things you can't. You cannot control the reaction to your story. You can't control whether or not anybody reads it, anybody likes it, anybody comments on it. So let's talk about the things you can control. You can control the work you put into your story. You can control focusing on positive interactions with other writers in the fandom. You can control celebrating other statistics like word count or time you spent researching or writing it or just completing it. I mean, that's pretty fantastic that you created something. It's a type of art. You're awesome for doing that. Maybe try to find fanfic friends to be excited about writing with and help support each other. Summer of Spock gave me a wonderful quote, which is, find a group of friends who write and write with them. I found that urge for comments was really a desire for community and a fear of creation in a vacuum. Once I had people I was working on stuff with regularly, I wasn't so hung up on stats. Other tips are, find something in the story that makes you happy. Did you enjoy writing it? Did it make you happy, bring you pleasure? Are you proud of it? Try to see comments and kudos for what they truly are, a nice bonus, not fleeting validation. Another quote that I really loved by Yoon Prennet express, treat fanfiction as what it is, a hobby that should be fun for you, not stressful and demoralizing. If you feel stressed all the time, you're doing it wrong. This is not your job. This is your passion. You do it for the love of it and because the story won't leave your head if you don't get it down on paper. If you're chasing comments and validations and kudos, then maybe you need to take a step back. So, if you find yourself feeling negative about all of this, you can try to ignore your stats, ignore your comments maybe, or take a break from looking at them, or even take a break from posting if need be and focus on other hobbies. I've actually seen many writers say that they've done that. They've taken a break and then they were able to come back to writing more refreshed and relaxed. Another writer quote of somebody I interviewed is, if I had any advice to give, it would be to never ever look at your AO3 stats. I did it once and regretted it. and to find the joy in writing and the building of a story that is personally fulfilling to you. I think it can be very heady to get a lot of comments and popularity, but I also think that stats and validation chasing is a continually moving goalpost and that you will never find satisfaction in numbers. So all of this, of course, depends on your own resilience and comfort level. These are just things to think about. Okay, now that we have that out of the way, let's move on to comments. First off, let me make this absolutely clear. No reader is required to write a comment. I've seen some Tumblr posts about how readers must comment, and I'm going to come back at that and say emphatically, no, they don't. I am not here to say that you must write comments. I am here to give tips to writing comments for those readers who are interested. If you do comment, know that writers love and adore them. Positive comments can help a writer feel better about their work, bring a spot of brightness to their day, and sometimes even inspire them to continue writing. I had an experience where I stumbled across a unfinished fantasy fic that I just adored that hadn't been updated in ages. So I made it a personal campaign to leave a lengthy, enthusiastic comment on every chapter spread out over several weeks. And it actually worked. It inspired the writer to complete the story. That doesn't always happen. I've tried that in other situations. It didn't work, but I was super thrilled it did it. It did it then. It was a win for both of us, right? So commenting on a fic, what not to do. Unless a writer asks for feedback, do not give unsolicited feedback or advice. Do not name things you didn't like. Do not tell the author what you would have done differently. Do not say negative things about a fic, point out flaws. Do not tell an author you stopped reading for any reason. If you read something in a fic you don't like, don't say anything at all, or if you really don't like it, just stop reading it. Remember, these are actual people with actual feelings that you can hurt behind these stories. I've done a lot of interviews, like I said, and I've talked to writers that have gotten upset, depressed, cried, have deleted entire stories because of feeling attacked in comments. So think to yourself, do you really want to be the person that tempts them to stop writing forever, presumably something that they love to do, and delete their entire AO3 account because you made them feel so bad? Now, for writers that do invite feedback and critique on their stories, that's fine. Just make sure if you do that, do it politely, constructively, in ways that could be helpful. And I also recommend that you soften it a bit by including things you like, as well as things that could be improved. So before you click on that comment button, read back what you wrote and ask yourself, if you were the author, would you like reading that? Would you enjoy it? Is it ambiguous as to what your intent is? Many writers, including myself, have sometimes gotten some very odd comments where we're reading it and we're not at all sure what the reader was intending to say. Is it good? Is it bad? How the heck am I supposed to respond to this? And as far as commenting tips and leaving comments, I'm going to start off with saying that there is no positive comment that is inadequate. So I have a quote here from Entangled Now. I think it is important to tell commenters that a simple thank you or a great story chapter, I enjoyed this, is a good comment, and not to worry that it won't be appreciated or that they should leave more or their comment isn't good enough. Another quote I have is, even a simple I loved this is delightful. Anything that says a person had a good time reading it. So we've established that detailed comments are not required, but some readers may be interested in tips on what they could comment on. You could comment on the tone of the writing, the characterization, the interactions, the scene. Was it well balanced, natural, realistic? You could comment on the plot. What were your favorite parts, lines, turns of phrase? And this is a big one I'm pretty sure all authors enjoy. How the story made you feel, how you related to it. Another quote from an author was, it's nice to hear you're a great writer, but I think I cherish more the you made me feel things. Oh, yes, that's perfect. I agree with that. I'd love to know how my story made you feel. with the caveat that you should keep in mind that writers are not your therapist. Both myself and many writers have seen some commenters write some very personal things that can, in the comments, that can make a writer feel uncomfortable. I really don't know how I should reply to a deep, dark confession from your past, except feel bad for you. Another fun idea that a writer I interviewed mentioned is that when a reader commented on what they were doing when they were reading the story, like, I read this with my morning coffee, I read this on the bus, I snuck away into the bathroom at work to read it, those all feel very companionable to them, and it's just a fun way to relate to a real world scenario of what you're doing when you're reading it. Commenting on explicit fics. So, AO3 asks the reader if they are okay with reading explicit works before continuing, but there is no such consent for an author reading the comments posted on their story. Keep in mind that just because an author writes explicit stories doesn't mean they're comfortable in reading explicit content that they didn't write themselves. Now, if you know the author and know they're okay with explicit comments, then have at it. But be respectful of everyone else. I've spoken to several authors that have felt very uncomfortable with some of the explicit comments left by readers. Which brings us to the question, what do I say about explicit chapters? Because there is just as much work, often more, that goes into writing explicit scenes. Believe me, there's a lot to keep track of. What goes what? Where does it go? How do the characters feel about that? And it's lovely to reward writers for that work with an appreciative comment. So I've collected some suggestions here. You can say what you thought about the flavor or tone of the scene. What did you think about the relationship of the characters? Were they romantic, emotional, pining? What did you think about their feelings before, during, after? Other ideas include commenting on the characterizations. What did you feel about their emotional connection? Did the scene feel natural, realistic, romantic, frantic? What were your favorite parts, quotes, and how did you feel about them? Again, keeping the expression of your feelings above the belt, as it were. Now I'm going to talk about responding to comments as a writer. Reading negative comments. This is a tough topic. And I am not talking about asked for constructive criticism worded in a professional, polite manner. I love those. I'm talking about unsolicited negativity. There is no doubt that this can be really, really hard. I've had writers share with me some remarkably bad comments they've gotten and how that has made them feel. It can make writers feel sadness, shame, anger, cause self-doubt, cause them to cry, and even tempt them to give up something they love, writing, forever. One negative comment, whether in fan fiction or in real life, sadly has the potential to wipe out the effects of at least 10 positive comments that came before that. But that being said, try not to dwell on one negative review in a sea of positive feedback. Maybe go back and reread the positive comments you've gotten to remind yourself that it's not all bad. Try not to let a random stranger on the internet have the power to take the fun out of writing for you. And I do want to point out that if a comment intent could be interpreted as ambiguous, keep in mind that most of communication is nonverbal. So writing is not a clear method of communication. There's no voice tone or body language to go off of, and you don't even know if English is their first language. So reading true intent can be challenging. I recommend first off that you try waiting before deciding what to do, because when you're hurt or upset is not the best time to deal with it. I also personally believe that it doesn't do you or the commenter any good to lash out. Even if you're positive you're dealing with a flat-out jerk, try to stay polite anyway. Keep your cool, don't stoop to their level, and don't start a nasty argument. That just increases angst and negativity for everyone, and will honestly probably make you feel worse. So, Your choices on what to do with a negative comment. You could ignore it. There's plenty of writers that do that. They just don't dignify it with a response. You could delete it. This can be very empowering to do. And the bonus is you never have to read it again. I've done it. It's a pretty great feature. It's not common to get a truly unpleasant or vicious comment, but it's happened. Remember that the crazy trolls out there aren't worth spending your energy on. You don't want to encourage them, and deleting the comment can be a fantastic way to deal with that. You can freeze a thread. So what this does is it prevents new replies from being added to a comment and prevents comments in the thread from being edited. So this is particularly helpful for when readers reply to other readers' comments and there ends up being some rudeness or harassment going on. So freezing the thread helps stop that from going further. Or you can reply to it. So again, I will say my personal opinion is I feel that yelling at commenters has the potential of making things worse. If they didn't intend to be mean, that's not only going to make them feel bad, it may prevent them from ever commenting again. And maybe not just them, but other people who happen to read it may feel uncomfortable or nervous commenting going forward. I find it very helpful to check with fandom friends before replying, and I recommend selecting the right friend that will help you keep things in perspective. I personally don't want somebody to encourage me to start a flame war. I want someone like my friend Nicken because I know that not only will she give me sympathy and commiserate that, yep, there's thoughtless and crazy people out there, she'll also give me advice on how to respond calmly. So you can reply with something simple like, I hope you find a story that's a better fit for you, which clearly suggests they may want to move on. You can reply with your rationale behind whatever it was that they said, and that's up to you. And you could perhaps point out to them that their comment wasn't nice, but that's entirely up to you. Do you really want to spend the energy trying to teach them the error of their ways? Maybe you do, but don't feel that you have to. It's not your job. So, responding to comments in general. Just like no reader is required to leave a comment, no writer is required to respond to a comment. So I got a question here. What about commenting on a negative comment as another reader? Again, that's a tricky one because I feel myself that it's the domain of the writer to decide how they want to deal with comments. And I, again, want to really discourage flame wars. I think that you can reply to another reader, but I would again encourage everyone to be respectful and reply and polite and not again yell at them, make them feel bad. There's probably nothing wrong with being able to say that might be interpreted as not nice. You might want to rethink that, something generic like that. But again, I really want to do everything I can in this presentation and in real life to encourage people to be polite to each other and to emulate behavior that you want them to do. So as far as responding to comments, I am going to say here that no writer is required to respond to comments. There are lots of very legitimate reasons why a writer might not reply to a comment or any comments. They might not have the time, they might not have the mental energy for it, they're shy, anxious, nervous about it, they get too many comments to realistically respond to. Some very popular writers get 100 comments on a single chapter. Can you imagine how much time consuming and overwhelming it would be to respond to all of them? I've had authors share with me that they've had readers threaten to stop commenting if they don't respond to their comments. Now that's plain rude. If that's true, then that's your preference. You shouldn't try to guilt trip them. Yes, I totally get that it's fun to feel like you have a reciprocal relationship with an author. I really love that too. But they don't owe you anything. They took the time to write a story that you presumably enjoyed. They don't owe you personal validation on top of that. One quote from an author I interviewed was, I don't look at fandom as a transactional thing. I don't think that because I write something, I deserve comments. And likewise, if I give a comment, I don't expect a response. Some writers who don't typically reply to comments will add an author's note, something to the effect of, "Gosh, I adore all your comments. They mean the world to me. Thank you so much. But I really don't have the time, energy, ability, etc., to respond to them. But know that I do appreciate them." So, including something like this may help ease both the writer's and the reader's expectations. Responding to multiple comments on a completed fic. So if you have the situation where a commenter leaves multiple comments within a short period of time on a multi-chapter completed fic, especially if they're on the shorter side of comments, you have some choices. If you want to reply back, you can reply to them all, but do you really have the time and energy to reply to all of them? One writer shared with me that they woke up one morning to something like 40 plus comments on a fic, and they're like, holy moly. Generally, when readers do that, they don't expect a response to every single one. You can reply to some, just the ones that, kind of spoke to you a little bit more. And you can reply only to the comment at the end, maybe including a "Wow, thank you so much for all of your wonderful comments." When replying to comments in general, you can mimic the tone of the comment. If the comment is just emojis, you can either do no reply, they're generally not expecting a reply at that case, or if you want, maybe just emoji back. If the comment was short, like a "loved this was great," all it really requires is a "thanks" or "glad you liked it." Again, or maybe not even a reply at all. If the comment was written in playful, excited capitals or lots of key smashes, you can be playful back, like, "Yay, I love that part too, key smash back." If it's long and thoughtful, you can choose to, if you want, respond thoughtfully back using their comments as the basis of your response. So short replies. Here are some ideas for short replies. You can just do a simple "thank you," "I loved your comment, adored it," "I'm happy or pleased about it," "your comment was lovely, amazing, thoughtful," "your comment made me feel some kind of emotion," or "I cherish them so much they went straight to my kneecaps." For those interested in writing longer replies, so there are people behind the comments and people do like to feel connected. If you are a writer that wants to do everything you can to encourage comments, this is one of the ways you can do that. Twilight City Sky gave me a great quote to use, which is, "Respond to the content of what they said and build on it." I usually say, "Thanks," and then pick something about what they said and add a little of my thought process around it. I love when I get to learn a little of what writers were thinking when they wrote something that spoke to me, where it came from, the meta that inspired it, the character development piece of it, etc. So, if the comment pointed out the relationship, characterization, dialogue, prose, you could respond to that thing particularly, maybe share a little of your writing journey in that regard. If the comment highlighted a particular scene, plot point, action, etc., you can engage with that. How did you come up with it? How did you feel about it? Were you inspired by something? What were you thinking of when you wrote it? Was it easy or hard to write? If it's historical fic, something about the history behind it. When I want to make a longer, thoughtful comment on a chapter, sometimes I get to the end of the chapter and all I can think of to type is, "You write good words? Me like?" Because I can't somehow remember anything I just read. So, a technique that I personally find helpful is I review the chapter on one screen while I type comments on a different screen. So, if you have multiple devices, you can do this either dual monitors, or you can type in the comment box on the computer while you're looking at the story at something like a smartphone or a tablet, that sort of thing. Another tool that's even more useful is the AO3 floating comment box. I think there might be a few versions of this type of thing out there, but it's a third-party tool that can be installed on your computer. It creates a floating comment box which allows for typing comics as you scroll through a chapter. It is the biggest feature that I very much wish AO3 would integrate into their website, as anything that makes it easier for folks to comment on is a win in my book. To find this, you just do a search for AO3 floating comment box on a web browser, and you'll be able to find it. A couple of random tips here, editing comments. If you comment and then go back and edit it, the author or reader will receive an email for each edit. So if you edit your comment 6 times, you will get 6 emails. Also, bookmarks. Unless you make a bookmark private, everyone can see it, including the author. So if your bookmarks are public, be cautious about what you say in the bookmark note section. Whatever you say, positive or negative, the author can see. So if your bookmarks are public, watch what you say. Betas. I only have time to hit the highlights of betas, so if you are interested in learning more about this topic, there's an entire presentation at this Ineffable Con titled Creating a Rewarding Beta Relationship by Ali Z.A. Dusk and Mira Worths that I recommend you watch. So in fan fiction, beta readers are used like editors and proofreaders. To start off with, do you have to have a beta? The answer is no. Not all writers have one. Not all writers want one. Consider your emotional capacity to receiving critique. Some writers hate hearing anything negative about their writing, so they should do a bit of self-acknowledging of that before deciding to allow someone to beta their work. If you take every edit suggestion personally, you're not going to enjoy the process. So some of the writers that I interviewed didn't use them. One quote is, "A lot of people like them, but I'm not a big fan. I don't take my writing very seriously, so I'm good with just sort of throwing it up online and letting it be what it is." And before you think that this particular writer, well, maybe they're no good, this is a very good writer. So, so they were good with just kind of if there's mistakes, if there's continuity problems, it's all good. I don't mind. I'm just in here to have fun with it. But if you do want a beta, it's important to establish what you were looking for in one. It's not just helpful, but absolutely necessary to establish the type of beta that is wanted right up front. It will only lead to disappointment and frustrations on both sides, writer and beta, if that's not done. The type of beta people want is very individual. Some people will welcome a beta tearing them to shreds, but others will only want feedback on things like spelling and grammar support. Depending on the beta, they can provide a wide range of feedback from only spelling, grammar, punctuation, all the way to plot, characterization, flow type of feedback. A Brit picker beta is someone British who gives feedback about correct British terms and/or spellings if you're writing a British story and you want to be accurate. A sensitivity feedback beta is having someone from a culture that is not your own to provide feedback as to if you are being culturally sensitive. So a couple of examples include you're writing about a trans character and you may ask a trans person to look it over to make sure you're not being culturally insensitive. Or you might be writing a sex worker story and then you might ask a sex worker to look it over for you, again, to see if you're not being insensitive to that particular culture. These are examples of varying types of beta work. Now, not all betas can do these things. And if you're thinking about trying out beta work, please do not be intimidated by this list. I do some beta work and I certainly can't do all of these things. One of my betas recently suggested that I change the focus of an action verb in one of my sentences. And I was like, yes, right. What's an action verb? How do I do that? Obviously, sentence structure is not a strength of mine. And that's brilliant that she can do that for me. So these are just some general ideas to get you started thinking about it. Notice that most of the things on this list are critique. And I point that out because most writers appreciate it when betas also include comments about what they liked about the chapter as well. If all they hear is negative comments, it's hard for them to know if they've done anything right or if the story should just be tossed in the trash bin, never to be seen again. And just like any kind of relationship, sometimes it takes a few tries to find a beta that's a good match for you. One story I was told from a beta is that the author replied to every single one of their comments with justifications as to why the text had to stay exactly the way it was. So that might be more of an instance of if you don't like any of my suggestions, then perhaps you need a different beta. One of the most important parts of working with a beta is to express your appreciation for this free work that they are doing for you. If you don't appreciate them, they likely won't want a beta for you in the future. Thank them publicly in the chapter notes. It can be a simple thanks to X for the beta work, or a more effusive thanks to the wonderful X for the amazing beta work. You are a goddess. Both examples, perfectly fine, and depend a lot on the relationship you have with your beta. You can thank them during the editing process. I do all of my beta work via Google Docs, which makes responding to edit suggestions very easy. Saying things like, good point, great idea, gives feedback that their comments are helpful and appreciated. You do not need to leave an appreciative comment on every suggestion, of course, but maybe the ones where it was particularly useful or impactful. You should also thank them via direct messaging, like Discord, Tumblr, email, wherever the main communication happens with them. You shouldn't send them a chapter with a note saying, ready for more thankless beta work, because you should be thanking them. And speaking of expressing appreciation, you can also consider publicly thanking others that helped you with a chapter in other ways. So if someone helped you with brainstorming, sensitivity feedback, consulting on an element that they specialize in, etc., it's always appreciated to give a shout out to them in the chapter notes. Because I talked about the importance of tagging, I thought I should talk about how to search and filter for tags. The AOC3 search box isn't great, but it can get you started. So what you can do is go to the search box and type in the name of the fandom, character, or user you want to read, and then click the search button. The reason I say that the search box isn't great is because the results you will get will include any work on the archive that contains your search term. It doesn't know whether the word you're searching for is an author's username or the name of the fandom or freeform tag, etc. It will give you the results with your search term though, and that's good enough to get you started. So here in this example, I typed in Good Omens. Then I found the tag I'm looking for, which was Good Omens, Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. And then when I click on that tag, two things happen. Now I can see the list of works for that tag, which is over 34,000 works. I like to read, but even that's a bit much for me. So the second thing that happens is that to the right on the web browser appears at this point the sort and filter box on the right-hand side. So now I can go there to include and exclude all sorts of tags to narrow down what I might be looking for. So this concludes my presentation. I appreciate all of you for taking the time to watch and hope that I've given you some useful tips and done my small part in helping this fandom be a supportive, positive place. These were fascinating topics to research and interviewed writers and readers about, and I was fortunate to make a lot of connections in this fandom as a result of this project. I do love researching and presenting, so if anyone has suggestions of future topics they'd like to learn more about at a future con, or if you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out to me, AJ Constantine, on Discord or Tumblr. And I think we have about 2 minutes, so if we have questions. Do you have a doc or resource or PowerPoint available later? So yes, I believe there's a way I can load the PowerPoint at the con. I'll find out about that, but also feel free to reach out to me on Discord or Tumblr, and I'll be happy to send you my notes or the PowerPoint. Then I have a question about commenting, kind of between no negativity and sharing how you felt while reading. I've had fics where at the end of the chapter, I'd write that I was mad at a character for what they did. I try to make it clear that I love the story, but sometimes I worry that kind of comment still comes off as criticism or dislike. Oh, yes. So that's expressing your feelings about the character's doing. So this is what I do in that situation. So I have absolutely said, oh my God, I'm so mad at Crowley for doing this. Oh, that's such a crazy thing that he did. But I will always, always finish up that comment then with something like, I really love the story, really love the way you're telling it. Thank you so much, that kind of a thing. So I'm expressing how I'm feeling, and that's fine. but it's not all negative, and I'm making it clear that I enjoy what the author's doing. I'm just expressing the feelings I have about the character. Okay, so that is time. Thank you all very much. And again, feel free to reach out to me with further questions.